Let us begin by reading aloud the problem. The word problem states, Hannah worked a total of 1,040 hours at the tutoring center. If Isabella worked a total of 832 hours at the tutoring center, how many more hours did Hannah work than Isabella? So the first step in our strategy for problem solving is always to analyze a problem. So let's go ahead and reread it sentence by sentence and see how much information we can extract. So step 2 is always to assign the variable. When assigning the variable, you want to know what the variable is going to represent. And you determine what the variable represents by determining what question needs to be answered. In this case, the question that we want to answer is, how many more hours did Hannah work than Isabella? So now that we know the question that we want to answer, we know what our variable is going to represent. So let us go ahead and assign a variable now that we know what it should represent. So here we go. X. We could use the letter X, and then again we could use any letter we want. It doesn't necessarily have to be X, but in this case we'll just use X for this problem. So X is going to equal the number of more hours Hannah worked than Isabella. Let me go ahead and fix that typo. Worked than Isabella. There we go. Now let's go ahead and read the first sentence and see what information we can extract from that. So we know Hannah worked a total of 1,040 hours at the tutoring center. And we also know Isabella worked a total of 832 hours at the tutoring center. So what we want to know is how many more hours did Hannah work than Isabella? So let's draw a number line. So here we go. Whoop. So let's see. So this number line is going to represent the number of hours they worked. And then we'll go by hundreds. So here's 0, here's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, and the last one, 1,100. So here we go. Now let's draw a number scale. So we know, what do we know? We know Hannah worked a total of 1,040 hours at the tutoring center. So start off at 0. And we'll go all the way up to 1,400, just about midway through. And now we know also that Isabella worked a total of 832 hours. So we'll go all the way up to 800, pass it a little bit, and we'll stop right there. So again, 832, and we have 1,040. So now the question that we want to answer is, how many more hours did Hannah work than Isabella? Well, that's going to be represented by this number here. This space in between. That space right there, that green, that's going to be our variable x, and that's what we want to know. So we're going to go ahead and create an equation, and then I'm going to solve that equation. So going based off what we know that Hannah worked more hours than Isabella. We want to know what that exact number of more hours that she worked is. How do we go about determining that? So the general outline we're going to be following here is going to be the larger minus the smaller is going to equal the difference. So in which case, the larger is the number of hours Hannah worked. So it's going to be 1,040. And then we're going to subtract from that the number of hours that Isabella worked, which is a smaller 832. And then that's going to be equal to the difference between the two, which is x. And this x actually represents the number of more hours Hannah worked than Isabella. So our equation does make sense, and it does follow the given information. And it's going to lead us to the correct result. So now, when solving the equation, again, we always start off with the original equation, found in step 3. So 1040 minus 832 is equal to x. Now, our goal in all these problems is always to isolate the variable x on one side of the equation. It just so happens that for this problem, x is already completely isolated on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So all we really need to do is simplify the left-hand side. So we'll go ahead and do that off to the side as scratch work. So we're going to have 1040 minus 832. So starting off with the furthest column to the right, we're going to do 0 minus 2. We can't do that since 0 is less than 2, so we have to borrow from the 4 next door. That 4 becomes a 3, and our 0 now becomes a 10. So now we're going to be doing 10 minus 2, which is going to give us 8. Following along with the second column, we'll have a 3 minus a 3. That's going to give us a 0. And then we're going to be left with 10 minus 8. Which is going to give us a 2. So 1040 minus 832 is equal to 208. And then we'll just bring on down the equal sign, and we'll bring on down our already isolated variable x. So we know x is equal to 208. And now just keep in mind what x actually represents. X represents the number of more hours Hannah worked than Isabella. So now let's go ahead and state our conclusion clearly. Therefore, we want to answer the question, how many more hours did Hannah work than Isabella? And thus, Hannah worked 208 more hours than Isabella. And there we go. So our conclusion is now stated clearly as Hannah worked 208 more hours than Isabella. Now the last step is to go ahead and check the result. So let's just go ahead and start off with the original equation when checking the result. So we'll have 1040 minus 832 is equal to x. However, we already know that x is equal to 208, which was found in step 4. So now on the left-hand side, all we need to do is simplify the 1040 minus 832. We found that earlier to be 208. So we have 208 equals 208. We always ask ourselves if that is a true statement, in which case we know that 208 certainly is equal to 208. Since we have a true result, our solution of x equals 208 is correct, and therefore we know that Hannah worked 208 more hours than Isabella.